Hi, this is Dan Thompson. I think you'll find this video interesting if you've ever considered an indexed universal life policy or an IUL, or maybe even have one. See, I got an email from a person concerned about their IUL, so we got on a call together and he proceeded to tell me the story. It turned out to be another IUL disaster. Let me back up and say, I actually like indexed investment vehicles, such as the indexed annuity. However, the IUL has some issues with it that are really hard to overcome, as you're going to see as I go through this story with you. So here's a guy, about 45 years old, medical professional, does very well. Back in '09, I think it was, he was convinced that a IUL would be a really good asset for him to have. The illustrations depicted some crazy good results. I mean, the lure of those numbers, it has to be tempting. You couple that with the safety net of never losing money to the market decline, and you think you have a winner. Well, the problem is he, nor in this case, probably the agent who sold it to him, had any idea how they worked and what has to happen for that illustration to become even close to accurate. The first glaring problem is the illustration used a hypothetical return of 10% per year. Now I'm telling you right now, if you're looking at an illustration at 10% per year or even 8 or 9%, run. Run as fast as you can. This is simply a fairy tale. It's not going to happen. You see, an IUL illustration carries with it so much speculation. They may even show you a return of, say, 6%, which you think sounds reasonable, but here's what has to happen. It can't average 6%. It has to actually get 6% every year, year in and year out, never missing a year without fail to get the results the illustration shows. You think that will happen? Well, it's never happened. I've been at this for about 30 years. Markets never perform like that. I'm guessing they never will, especially when you're looking at an illustration out 20 or 30 years. Well, every year the IUL doesn't get 6%, it's actually going backwards from the illustration. Now we have to, dissect this a little bit more, and we do that in our IUL, VUL implosions, so I'll save some of that for there. We also have a shorter video that just talks about the IUL, so you might want to check that. But anyway, back to our IUL disaster. This is what really blew me away and why these illustrations are nothing more than a piece of paper with some numbers on it. I looked in the back of the illustration where it discloses the market returns over a longer period of time. I was intrigued by this chart that showed that one of the blended indexes that he was participating in looked like this. It basically shows the index from 1990 to 2015. Now, to someone who doesn't know what to look for, this might seem pretty decent. But here's the problem. Notice the compound average in the index over that period of time was 6.87%. Yet the hypothetical rate that they show as being credited is 8.89%. Now, that looks pretty good, right? This is once again where averages lie. Why? Because if you count it up in this period of time, there were 7 years of zeros. Now, you would think that's a good thing, right? And it's a point that is emphasized over and over and over by these agents. I mean, the cash value didn't lose when the market went down. Of course, there was no credit for that year of zero either, but again, no market losses. And again, at first glance, you might say, that sounds like a nice trade-off. Well, let's actually see. The problem is there were still costs, substantial costs in those 7 years where there was no credit or 0 years. That means the policy actually went backwards every one of those 7 years. So how much? Well, we got to turn to the back where the disclosure pages are and see what the costs are. So here was a quick snapshot. Now, notice at age 43, it's only showing half a year based on when this illustration was run. So let's look at age 44 to get a full year's costs that are broken down. If we add up all the columns, 1,155, 709, 3,380, 60, we get 5,304. So out of the $21,000 that he puts in, $5,304 comes out. This $5,400 is just pure cost, and it's for the first 10 years. What you're seeing is what I call, or is what's called an in-force illustration. This has been done after he's been in it for 3 years. Okay, so back to the yearly cost. If all I did were to calculate the percentage of cost based on his premium, it comes out to 25%. That means 25% of his premium went to pay costs, not the cash value, simply costs. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty expensive cost. That means he loses 25% right from the start every year. So in a year he gets 0% because the market didn't perform or crashed. He actually goes backwards $5,400 because of the annual costs. So even though it might sound good that you can't go down with the market, a zero or several zeros can ruin your future plans as well. So again, let's look at the chart. There were 7 zeros from 1990 to 2015. That means the IUL would have lost 7 times 5,300, which is $37,100 lost due to costs and 0 years. Now think about this and why a zero can actually be devastating. Following a year of zero, the index or the return has to make up for that $5,300 lost and drain that, or from the drain that it took the year before. This would only make up for last year's costs that came out from the premium, and because the cash value is credited with a zero, has to come from somewhere. In addition to making up for the $5,300 in cost, it needs to make up for 8% that was projected to keep pace with the illustration. See, the illustration assumes 8% every year, year in and year out. Now to add further insurmountable problems. In order to keep up, not only does the market have to make up for the $5,300 from last year's cost, but it also has to earn another $5,300 for this year because there are more costs coming out this year too. And it has to get 8% for last year, and it has to get 8% for this year as well. In this case, his surrender value is right at about $28,000. He had put in $61,000, but he can only access or get $28,000 either through a loan or if he just walked away. In reality, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with the illustration if he has 1 0 year. Remember, the illustration assumes 8% every year, year in and year out, never missing a year, forever. You can see why you can't average 8% because there's costs coming out each year. It has to actually get 8% every year. And even if there was some crazy run in the markets and it actually happened, in this particular IUL, he has a cap of 14%, which means the most he can ever get credited in any given year is 14%. From the outset, you'd think 14% cap seemed pretty reasonable, but in reality, it can prevent the policy from ever catching up from a 0 year. You see, the sizzle of an IUL is that you get market-like returns with no losses, but zeros are a killer in an IUL because of the huge costs. So that's it for this video. Again, I'm Dan Thompson. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'll get them answered just as quick as I can. Until next time, take care.